All right. Well, I think we'll go ahead and get started, everybody. I appreciate you joining us this morning. My name is Dan Shaver. I'm the state forester for NRCS here in Indiana. And this is our chance, at least once a year, we like to get together with all the district foresters and go through the changes and updates to our programs and our practices and our payment rates, just so that everybody is on the same page as we get ready to start the big process of. We've already been asking for applications, but as we're getting new management plans done and filling out NRCS DNR planning sheets, we want to make sure that everybody has all the correct information to get started. And so we're going to take a little bit of time to run through this today. As we go through the presentation, if you have questions or comments, don't hesitate to raise your hand and we can call on you if you have a question. You're welcome to put something in the chat if that's easier or you're more comfortable putting something in the chat, and we'll try to address it as we go along, as well as we should get done early today and have some time for questions at the end if people want to have discussions about anything. Before we get started, Brenda, did you want to say anything to the group or have anything for the group?
Nope, I just talked to them all last week.
Okay, wonderful. You an email this morning, Brenda, with a copy of this presentation and a portion of our practice user guide, mainly the forestry practices, so that you can pass that along. I
sent it out to the staff.
Oh, fantastic.
I emailed it out.
Wonderful. Nice. And then Shannon, did you have anything to start the morning off with, or?
Not necessarily, Dan, but just welcome everyone, and thank you, Dan, for putting this together to keep all of our valued partners informed of where we're heading this year with our programs, and look forward to hearing your feedback and continue the great partnership we have out there at the local level. And again, just as I'm sure you know, if there's any hurdles or bottlenecks in your helping our local offices, by all means, get that information out to Brenda and myself and Dan, and we'll find the best solution we possibly can. Keep things moving forward for our joint clients. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Shannon. All right, well, we'll jump into this. I'm going to turn my video off because we are recording this, and we'll get a YouTube link sent out to everybody. If you need to go back and watch part of this or look at it or have questions, you can do that. But I'm going to go ahead and be impersonal now and turn my camera off and jump into this presentation. So to start out with, you guys may have noticed we had an administration change here this year, and NRCS, whenever there's an administration change, all those changes ripple down through us, including who our chief is and other positions, as well as some of the principles and values we work off of. This is not shocking. This came down from our chief here a while back, and the principles for NRCS really haven't changed. We're still focused on one-on-one technical and financial assistance to private landowners. We're still a science-based organization that is locally driven. We have all of our local offices in the counties working with those clients and meeting them in the field on their properties and working face-to-face with farmers. And it's still voluntary conservation. So we are not a regulatory agency. We are working with those landowners that come through our doors or your doors, and they want to have some assistance with conservation, and we're here to help them, whether it's technical or financial assistance. Just to give you a little update on last year's funding trends and where we are, this is overall funding with NRCS over 2018 to 2025. You can kind of see the graph. The green is our financial assistance, and the orangish red color is our technical assistance. Technical assistance is the money that funds our offices, our people, our agreements, and the financial assistance is the money that goes out to private landowners to do good work on the land. So you can see for 2025, we dipped off just a little bit. That was mainly the loss of the Inflation Reduction Act. A lot of that funding was pulled back. For 2026, we are still looking pretty good in Indiana. Sorry, this is still 2025 information. I just wanted to show that we have the majority of our money goes into the EQIP program, Environmental Quality Incentives Program, and then a large portion into CSP, Conservation Stewardship Program. Again, it's not all forestry dollars, but forestry gets a portion of it. Just to give you an idea of how much money is going to forestry practices, this is a list of some of our top obligated practices in 2025. And you can see brush management, which is our invasive species control practice, and forest stand improvement. They're up in our top 10 when it comes to spending in Indiana. And brush management still seems to dominate the money spent. It's an expensive practice. We hit it on a lot of acres. And as you all know, we pretty much can't do forestry anymore without addressing the invasives first. So it's a key practice in Indiana. Some of that may be tied to other applications for cropland and pasture and other things, but forestry gets a large portion of that with our applications. And for 2026, financially, we're about the same as we were in 2025 minus the Inflation Reduction Act funding. So you can see 21 million for EQIP and about 16 million for CSP. There's a little note on there about 25% going to something called RPP. We'll talk about RPP here in a few minutes. I'll throw the acronym out without telling you what it is, just to leave you in suspense for a couple minutes here before we get to that new program. A few of the big changes this year that we have gone through. Last year, you may have noticed or may not have noticed, but we actually had cost of living allowances last year where we had to adjust the payment rate for each practice based on geography. This was not very fun for our county offices. It was hard to explain. It was hard to track. And so this year they are doing away with the county specific cost of living payments. The payment rate for brush management will be the same regardless of where you live in Indiana. It won't change based on location. That may not have impacted you very much directly, but for us, that was kind of a nightmare to deal with. A few other things that are changing this year, the climate smart agriculture and forestry. We talked about this the last couple of years. That program has gone away. The Inflation Reduction Act, IRA, has gone away. And the Southern Indiana Sentinel Landscape RCPP, unfortunately, that was funded through the Inflation Reduction Act. And when that money went away, that RCPP had to be canceled. There is still a Southern Indiana Sentinel Landscape. The Conservation Law Center is still working to promote that landscape in that area down there, but there's just no NRCS funded RCPP at this point in time. So just keep that in mind. A few things have been simplified and streamlined this year. Some things that were helpful may have been lost, but we're going to move forward and do the best we can with what we have. Another big change this year is payment schedules. And over the years, the nomenclature has changed a little bit. We used to talk a lot about cost share payments from our financial incentives to landowners. And we used to reference a lot that our payments to landowners represented about 75% of the cost of doing that work. Well, we are no longer doing cost share payments. Those are going away. We are now doing incentive payments to landowners, and those incentive payments are not necessarily guaranteed to hit 75% of the cost of doing the work. Some incentive payments may cover 100%. Some of them may cover 50%. It is just an incentive payment to landowners. You will no longer hear our staff referencing roughly 75% of the cost. And I would strongly encourage all of you to discontinue telling landowners that. If they're curious how much this incentive payment is going to cover the actual cost of work, that is one of those they need to speak with a contractor or whoever is going to do the work for them and get those bids and check those prices. There is no longer a guarantee that we're hitting about 75% of the cost. That's a big departure from what we've promoted and talked about in the past. But just know we are now paying an incentive payment. It is a flat rate for the landowner to do that work. Since we no longer are calling it a cost share, we no longer collect bills or receipts typically when we're paying on these practices. The practices are judged based on the work that was done, and if they've done the work, they receive the incentive payment. Now, there are a few practices out there still where we want some specifics. Tree planting jumps to mind. We typically want to see a list of the species they purchased so that we can compare that to the tree planting plan and understand that they did purchase the correct seedlings for the planting job. But we're not interested in those receipts anymore. It doesn't matter to us what the landowner paid to get the work done. We're still going to make this flat rate incentive payment if they complete the job. I'll slow down and take a drink for just a second, let that sink in. And again, don't hesitate to ask questions, or if something comes up in the chat, I'm going to open up the chat in case anything in, we can address it. All right, moving forward, here we go. There's a QR code here. You're welcome to scan this if you want to. When we work through our programs and practices for the year, we create a number of documents to help our field as well as help landowners in Indiana understand what we are doing and what we expect to be done with those practices when they implement them. It's typically posted on our NRCS website. It is publicly available. The big one is there highlighted in red, the practice user guide. I just saw a note that the QR code doesn't work. Okay, we will try to get that addressed, Gretchen, and it may take you to 2025 still. I was going to mention that. I don't know that we have our 2026 documents posted, so let me know if it's not working at all or if it took you to 2025 information. Oh, it's deactivated. That's no good. Okay, ignore that QR code. We will get you the full practice user guide once we have it in final form, and we'll also get you a link. I'll send Brenda that link to get you to the website so you can find it easily. But the practice user guide defines our priorities in Indiana. So when you look at some of the national payment scenarios and information that outlines the different practices available, they may show up as available in Indiana, but in Indiana, we prioritize certain practices within brush management or forest stand improvement. And those are the ones that show up in our practice user guide. And I see Shannon just sent a link in chat. Hopefully that'll get you where that QR code was supposed to get you so you can see that information. Again, I'm not positive the 2026 information is up on the website yet, but it will be soon. So we encourage you to look at these documents and pay attention. If something is a priority in Indiana, if a landowner comes in and they want to sign up for something that's not a priority in Indiana, we don't tell them that they can't sign up or they're not eligible. They can sign up. But if they're not implementing our priority practices, their application kind of gets put over in the low priority pile and is not likely to get funded unless they are doing our priority practices as outlined in the practice user guide. So a few things that are new for 2026. I'm going to touch just briefly on EQIP and CSP, but just know that CSP, we are still working out the details, and we will be coming out in the next with more information on CSP and how that's going to work in Indiana. With the Environmental Quality Incentive Program, we still refer to it as the Fix-It program. If landowners have big problems with invasive species, erosion, structure and composition is screwed up, they've had a bad timber sale, EQIP is the program we tend to look to fix those big problems. It can be done on a tract by tract basis, which is nice. If you have a landowner that owns 20 tracts of woodland, they just have to enroll that one tract that they want to work on this year, and they can do that through EQIP. We're targeting those resource concerns on that individual property, and we can plan for that individual property. The Conservation Stewardship Program, on the other hand, is aimed at the whole operation. So if a landowner owns 20 tracts of woodland in Indiana, they have to enroll all of those in the CSP program. There is a minimum payment tied to it, and it is a minimum 5-year contract for CSP. With the incentive payments that we make on the practices they implement, they may get more than $4,000 in a year. If their incentive payments are not greater than $4,000, they still get that minimum $4,000 payment each year. In the past few years, we've talked a lot about enhancements with CSP, and those are pretty much going away. We're not really promoting the individual enhancements like we did in the past. ESP is still aimed at trying to enhance and improve landowners' properties, but that exhaustive list of enhancements that we had for crop tree release with very specific requirements and bat habitat and snags, those have gone away. We're going to stick more with the practices that are available in EQIP, will mainly be available in CSP, and they're going to pay the same amount. So you know from past years that with CSP, brush management may have only paid $11 or $13 an acre. This year, the same rates that we pay in EQIP, we will be paying in CSP for similar work. So I think that's going to make CSP a lot more palatable to a lot more woodland owners, which may be a good option for some of them that are willing to enroll all their land and get into the CSP. Also create a little less confusion trying to explain why we pay, $400 in EQIP for brush management and only $22 in CSP. It'll all be the same rates across the board. That incentive payment will stay the same. Another new thing for 2026 is the regenerative pilot program. This is the RPP that I mentioned in that previous slide. This is a new program that's been rolled out, and 25% of the money going into EQIP and CSP is dedicated to the regenerative pilot program. This is a whole farm program where the goal is to assess all the properties owned and managed in a similar fashion by that landowner. So again, kind of like CSP, we'd pull all the forested tracts together into a whole farm assessment. They do have to do some primary practices. They can also do supporting practices, and I'll show you a list of those in a second. And they have to do soil health testing. This is kind of a strange one for woodlands. We don't typically do soil health testing in our forest lands, but with this program, if a landowner wants to apply and be part of it, they will have to do soil testing. And we have funding for soil health testing available. It will be scheduled into their contract, and they will have to do soil health testing in the first year and last year of the contract. Again, this is a little bit odd for forest land, and there's some other situations. We may not go through them all today, but we can work out if a landowner is enrolling some pasture land and some forest land, they could do the soil health testing on the pasture and not necessarily have to do it on the woodland. Same way with row crops. They could do the soil health testing on their row crops and not on their forest land. But if they're purely a woodland application, they will have to do that soil health testing. And for me, I'm somewhat interested. I'm kind of curious to see if we were to have a property that does soil testing and we do 3 years of brush management using herbicides, and then we give it a year or two to rest, and then we do that final year of soil health testing to compare the two. Is there any differences? Our soil health tests don't typically pick up chemicals directly, but it does look at microbial life within the soil and seeing if that changes or not changes. I wouldn't expect to change, but maybe it will. Once you get rid of 8-foot tall bush honeysuckle on 100% of the property, what is that microbial life in the soil going to do after it's gone? So it could be some interesting information. We'll just have to see, but just know that this is part of that program. They will have to do soil health testing. And here's a list of the priority practices for the RPP program, Regenerative Pilot Program. You can see that forest stand improvement is a priority practice. 314 brush management is not. So any application for woodlands into RPP is pretty much going to require forest stand improvement be done. If they need brush management, which they often do, that can be planned as a supporting practice, and you could do just like we typically do 3 years of brush management followed by forest stand improvement in either year 3 or 4. And that would be a perfectly acceptable application into the regenerative pilot program. Like I said, all lands of the same land use that is managed similarly under the control of the applicant is enrolled in this whole farm program. And we've gone through and provided some Indiana guidance to define what that looks like. It gets a little bit more complicated on lands where a farmer may have cropland, pasture, woodland, multiple crops, lands managed differently. And in Indiana, we're really looking at the same land use. So all the cropland or pasture or forest land that is managed the same and meets the control definition above, then we would kind of lump those together. There could be situations where lands are vastly different and you may not lump them together in the same RPP application. Maybe a landowner's got a bunch of tree plantations that are managed vastly different than his native second growth hardwood forest. The planner might be able to split those out into two applications so they're not all covered by the program at the same time. Again, your local district conservationist is the person you're going to work with to sort that out. I don't really feel like that you all need to be trying to tease that apart for landowners and helping them understand which lands are in or out for the RPP program. Refer them to the district conservationist and let them do their planning and make that decision with the landowner. I mentioned the soil health testing, and just for reference, you may hear it referred to as CEMA 216, CEMA. The practice that is planned on the land at the beginning and the end of the contract. And again, it is recommended but not required to be scheduled on the PLU, the planning land unit, in which conservation practices are being planned. Again, this just refers back to if they have cropland and forest land in the same application, they could do the soil health testing on the cropland and not the forest land. But if it's all woodland, again, they will be doing some soil health testing in the woodlands. And don't let this be a barrier, because we do pay pretty well for those soil health tests, and there are contractors out there that they can hire to do that work. We're going to be working with our contractors to kind of help them get geared up and prepared for this, because we anticipate a lot of people applying for RPP and wanting to be in that program. So just a little bit more about the soil health testing. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but this was kind of that reference to the microbial community, that there are two different levels of the soil health test. There's kind of a basic level and a little bit higher level test. Again, for woodland owners, I might encourage that higher level test so they can get a little better picture of the microbial community in their soil and see how it is impacted, not impacted, or improved over the life of their woodland contract. But it is up to the landowner to decide which level of soil health test they are interested in. And we've kind of joked, it seems like forest land is a bit of a stretch for this program just because of the soil testing. And typically we think of our forest soils as being very healthy with living roots and microbial activity and better structure and all these things. But again, it's part of the program, it's required. And so we will do it as needed on forest land. All right, that was kind of the rush through review of what's going on in Indiana, what's changed from 2025 to 2026. And now we're going to jump into the practice user guide and some of the updates to the forestry practices in the practice user guide. And when I spoke to the consultant today, I could actually see them slap their foreheads when we mentioned some of the changes. For you all, I'm not going to be able to enjoy that as much because I can't see you. But I anticipate there will be some slapping of foreheads out there as you wonder what in the world NRCS is doing and why are we doing this. And the very simple explanation is that historically in Indiana, when we would have practices available to us, there might be 20 different 314 brush management practice scenarios that we could choose from. And so Indiana could pick the ones that fit best to describe the work that we do, as well as pay a rate that helps get that work implemented, make sure that incentive payment is appropriate for the work that is being done. This year, they went through a national streamlining and basically reduced all payment scenarios by practice down to 6 or 7 choices for the states. And a lot of those choices don't make very much sense when you read the title of the payment scenario, of the practice scenario. And it's still, in Indiana, we're fortunate. We're very flexible in how we interpret how we're going to implement that practice on the ground. So just remember, the names have changed, but most of the practices have stayed the same. And don't get hung up on the names. We're still going to stick with a lot of, on the NRCS IDNR planning sheet, when you're putting in brush management, you're still going to put it in as very heavy, heavy, medium, and light, even though the may be called something different now. We're still going to stick with the same percentages, those same names on the planning sheet, and our planners can worry about getting the correct name in on the contract. You guys focus on doing the assessment, figuring out the basal area, the trees per acre, what needs to be done with forest stand improvement and brush management, and we can figure out the details on the practices to plan for that contract. So we're not going to run through all the forestry practices today. There's a few of them that just changed, maybe just the payment changed or the name changed slightly, but we're going to hit the main ones today. And the presentation that I sent to Brenda does include some information on all of these, but we may just go through the ones on the left today. So let's jump right in. Brush management. This is kind of the practice we plan on just about every property in Indiana that we're working on. You can see at the top right, there's a little table up there that has the new scenario names and the new payment rates that go along with brush management. And they look strange, but just remember the names have changed, but the implementation has stayed the same. We're still planning for 3 years of treatment with a decrease in incentive payment each year. The goal is 95% control by the end of the treatment. And you can plan up to 3 years of the light level in a row. So again, that's everything we've done in the past we're doing now. We still want you to put in, preferably in your management plans, the control level by year. The standard that Indiana has set has been 70% control the first year on every acre. So again, if you have 100 acres, you can't treat 70 and leave 30 untreated. But as you're treating those 100 acres, we anticipate that there may be as much of 30% of an acre missed here and there, areas the contractor couldn't get to the first year. They may have done forestry mulching, and there's still a lot of mature invasives up against the trees that need to be chemically treated the second year. We know they're not going to get 95% the first year. So we're really looking at 70% and making sure they hit every acre. By year 2, we're looking for 90% control of every acre. And then by year 3, 95% control across all acres. If for some reason you plan 1 year of invasive treatment, we still expect 95% control. If you plan 2 years of treatment, we still expect 95% control by the time we're done treating the invasives on that property. We're not going to treat 1 year of invasives and say we're getting it down, we're controlling at 70% and we're happy with it and we're going to move on. They need to have 95% of that contract, regardless of how many years you plan it or what level it's planned at. The goal is 95%. The table down here on the bottom left, hopefully you guys are looking at that as I'm talking a little bit. This is where it gets a little bit goofy. Again, very heavy infestation, so greater than 60% infestation. We're now going to plan biological control low density. They do not have to use goats. They can use herbicide. They can use mechanical. They can use mechanical and herbicide the first year. But that's just the name of the scenario and the payment rate that goes along with it, the incentive payment that goes with it. The heavy infestation is now called mechanical control for large shrubs, medium infestation. And don't try to make sense of the names. We were just trying to tie a scenario with a payment rate to make it work. So strange name, still 40 to 60% invasives out on the landscape. That's what you would plan. Split method. I have never heard of the split method in my life until this year when it popped up as a possible scenario. I can't tell you exactly what split method is supposed to be, but for Indiana, that is a medium infestation, 10 to 39% infestation. We're planning the split method. That is still just mechanical and chemical control of invasive woody vines, trees, and shrubs. Light infestation, you can see, is mechanical and chemical control, small shrubs, medium infestation. And then biological control can still be used for goats if somebody wants to do some grazing with goats. And then we have a less than 1 acre scenario for our small farm scenarios. With that small farm scenario, we can make 3 payments at the same payment rate. So if you have somebody that has a very small woodland or part of a small farm system, they can get some assistance on that small farm with that small scale payment. Here's just a little bit of a breakdown of how this new scenario plays out. And I wanted to share this with the consultants the other day because we are aware that this incentive payment, we do want landowners to choose to do this, voluntarily agree to control invasive plants. We want to pay enough to make it possible. And in the scenarios we put together this year, you can see that if you planned a traditional, very heavy, and medium, those 3 years of treatment, it's paying $81 less than it did last year over the 3-year period. So that is definitely something. When you look at that over 50 acres or so, it adds up for the consultant, for the landowner. But again, this is the payment this year. That's the incentive payment we're making. And the landowners need to get bids and adjust and make their decision on implementation, just like we encourage them to for anything else, timber sales and all that. Get bids, talk to 3 people, see what you want to do. You can see the heavy, medium, and light level. If you did that level of treatment, it actually went up $21 an acre. The medium, light went down $20 an acre. And the light treatment went up $11 an acre. So a little bit of variability there, but we tried to keep it as consistent as we could with the payment scenarios we had available to us. And again, this was a big change this year, going down to just 6 or 7 choices for the states. And a lot of it, there wasn't a lot of rhyme and reason as to the different payment rates and the names of them. So we just had to make do as best we could and come up with what will work in Indiana. I'm hoping a few people slap their foreheads out there looking at that. I'm just picturing that just to bring a little joy to my own life, but I think we can make it work. Just a quick reminder, I don't know if any of you recommended grazing with goats or had any landowners that chose to use goats as part of their brush management. The way we have it set up right now is that you can use goats in your first year, and then years 2 and 3 need to be scheduled like normal with mechanical and chemical control. Again, the goal at the end of 3 years is still 95% control at the end of 3 years. And we really look at those goats as an opportunity to knock back that initial year of very heavy infestation and get it down to a more manageable height where you can spray it a little bit more easily in years 2 and 3. It doesn't follow exactly along with what like Ron has recommended for using goats and using them for multiple years in a row before following up with chemical, but this is kind of us treading slowly into using goats or allowing landowners to utilize goats. But we still really see the need for the chemical control in years 2 and 3 to make sure it's effective. All right, well, some of these will go a little bit quicker than brush management. 338, prescribed burning. This is one we've been promoting as a priority practice in Indiana for a number of years, really trying to encourage the use of burning in our woodlands again. Unfortunately, with this scenario, the payment rate for woodlands went down. So we have a herbaceous fuel rate that stayed pretty consistent. The woody fuel rate, you can see the name of it there, it went down a little bit, which is a little bit discouraging, but we really didn't have any other options available to us this year to make it pay what we think it needs to in Indiana. But if you have landowners that want to do woodland burning, just know it can be incorporated into the management plan. We do have a planning activity. The DIA 160 is actually a prescribed burn plan that a landowner can sign up to have written by a technical service provider. And then once they get that plan, they could also schedule 338 and get money to implement that burn on their property. Again, we don't use this one a lot, but it's one we keep promoting, and I feel like we're getting a little bit more interest in woodland burning across the state. The Indiana Certified Prescribed Burn Managers law is helping with that, and we will accept plans from those Indiana Certified Prescribed Burn Managers. We will not pay for their plan unless they are a TSP through NRCS as well, but we can utilize their burn plans as part of our program implementation. All right, one of our tree planting scenarios, riparian forest buffer. This one, they only offered one payment rate in Indiana this year for riparian buffer, and it went up to $5,488 an acre for riparian buffer planting. This is one that has a 1 acre cap on it. Again, we're planting a minimum of 435 trees per acre. Tree protection is included in the scenario cost, so they need to either be putting tree tubes around some of their trees or putting a fence up around their trees. They can use bare root or container trees as they see fit. They're getting paid enough. If they want to do larger container trees, they can do that and do a few less trees per acre, but it's a very high payment rate. Again, we had nothing to do with the payment rate. This is what we were handed, and it was the only option for riparian forest buffer was this one payment scenario. So that's what we're going with this year. We tend not to do a lot of true riparian forest buffer plantings. We do a fair amount of bottomland hardwood planting, but not all of those acres in a bottomland hardwood area would qualify as riparian forest buffer. It's really those areas within close proximity to that water body. And within our technical notes and implementation requirements, we kind of define which areas are eligible for riparian forest buffer. Tree and shrub establishment. Of course, this is our traditional tree planting scenario. This is used a lot in Indiana. We've seen a little more activity with tree planting in EQIP, and then CSP had some different enhancements where we were doing more tree planting. I just want to remind everybody that when planting on existing forest land, you have to have a forest management plan, and that's typically in supplemental planting and forest openings. If you're planting on land that is not yet forested, you do not need a forest management plan. You just need a tree planting plan. And we have some great resources online to help with that. Our Forestry Tech Notes #2 on tree planting, and then 13 and 14 both cover tree protection and supplemental planting. So if you haven't seen those, I put the link in this presentation to those technical notes that you can look at or share with landowners as needed to help them understand what they need to be doing. Excuse me. When you look at the scenarios, again, this is kind of strange. This year with tree planting, they switched all of the scenarios to a per tree rate for tree planting. So we kind of wrestled at first, do we base the payment rate based off of the number of trees per acre that the district forester recommends, whether that's 680 or 500 or 400 and whatever, 54 trees, or do we go with a per acre scenario? And the only per acre scenario that they had available was called direct seeding. And so that is the name. When we are doing bare root planting in Indiana now, it is going to be direct seeding. And you'll see here in a minute, though, we've pretty much said direct seeding is not a viable option for tree planting in Indiana. So use bare root seedlings or container trees. But we just needed a payment rate that worked for Indiana. We did include the protection of natural regeneration, which is our protection scenario. So you can plan, 10 acres of direct seeding, plant your bare root seedlings, and then you could also plan that protection of natural regeneration on those same 10 acres. And that would provide that $450 an acre for the landowner to put up tree tubes or put up a fence, whatever they want to do to protect those trees. The medium container with protection scenario is aimed at supplemental planting in woodlands. It says medium container, but they lowered the payment rate, so we would accept bare root seedlings with a tree tube on them in an opening. That would be just fine. We really just want to make sure that we're getting those trees in those openings with protection around them, so that we're just not putting out food for the deer. We're actually hopefully giving those trees a chance. And then the large container with protection is our small scale scenario for those landowners that are doing pretty much an acre or less of tree planting. And that may even be a small farm scenario where they're planting 5 or 6 trees and not doing whole field reforestation like we typically do. Within the practice user guide, you'll see this table. This was encouraged by our district conservationists the other year. They wanted some of the basic rates for tree planting put in the practice user guide, so it made it a little quicker to reference versus going to find the technical notes and then looking at that to see what it says. So we included that, but we added in the current scenario name and the historic scenario name just to make it a little easier to make the connection on what we're trying to do with the new names of the scenarios. And you can see it for direct seeding. It says that we're primarily doing bare root seedlings per acre, and direct seeding is strongly discouraged. I asked the consulting foresters the other day if anybody was doing direct seeding in Indiana, and nobody raised their hand. So it's just one of those. I think they've proven in Indiana over time it's just not very successful. It's hard to be accountable for what was actually done and if it was successful. And so we really don't practice direct seeding in Indiana. Even though it's named that way, we're still looking at our bare root seedlings planted in a traditional fashion. All right, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. If anybody has anything, don't hesitate to put your hand up or put a note in the chat and we'll answer it. 655 forest trails and landings. This, I think, is an improvement this year for Indiana. Again, this needs to be written into the forest management plan, and we're making payments for areas with existing trails with resource concern. So forest trails and landings is not meant to build roads or trails on a landowner's property for UTV use or even for logging. Forest trails and landings is meant to go on where there are existing trails. They could be logging roads, skid trails. They could be a landowner's UTV trails. If there is erosion, if there's a resource concern on that trail that exists, we can use this to help address it. You can plan the shaping and grading and water bars on the same road. So this makes perfect sense to foresters. If you have 1,000 feet of log road that you need to rehab, you may do shaping and grading on that 1,000 feet of road, and you might go in and put in 10 water bars. That is perfectly fine. They can happen on the same geographic area. We don't need to know exactly where each water bar will be placed, but we need to know how many water bars are out there, and so that our planners understand they need to plan 8, 9, 10 water bars. If you can roughly mark them on a map, it is helpful, but that can also be done at the implementation phase if they get approved. You or another forester could mark where those water bars need to be, and then they can have them installed. The big change this year, which is nice, is that the water bar installation went up to $235 per water bar. I think in the past it was maybe $70 a water bar. It wasn't a very high payment. I don't know if this is excessive. When I think about trying to get a bulldozer out onto a property to do rehab of some skid trails where they did not do best management practices, I just like that we're paying a little bit more for those water bars now. And as you add those up across the property, it might help with that incentive payment a little bit more. All right, tree and shrub pruning. We don't do a lot of this in Indiana, but it does pop up occasionally in forest management plans. And with the number of acres of CRP that we have coming out of contract and maybe needing some work, this is something that you can utilize. This is one where I actually like the change this year. They actually went to a per acre rate for pruning. So in the past, we had a per tree rate. And of course, as you all know, based on diameter, we tend to do as the diameter gets bigger, we tend to prune less trees per acre. And it was a little hard to track with the per tree rate, but now we just have a per acre rate. So that can be planned across the plantation. We do, as you know, we focus our pruning on those species of higher value, our black walnuts, cherry, oak, other species that may be high value. Normally, we wouldn't do more than 150 trees per acre. And as the diameter increases, that number is going to decrease. So you guys have the flexibility as the forester writing the plan to look at a plantation, determine what the average diameter is. There are tables out there that suggest how many trees you should be pruned or thinned based on average diameter, and you can write that into your plan. Again, we want to try to keep this flexible and based on the forester's recommendation in the forest management plan. So put the details in there so that we can plan it appropriately and the landowner knows what to expect on how many trees per acre they need to be targeting. And again, some landowners want to prune every tree in their plantation. Some don't want to do any pruning. See a comment that pruning should only be done at stump height. I'm guessing that's a reference to thinning, but we can still do thinning through our forest stand improvement practices, and we would love to see that utilized on our plantations as well to do some thinning. Speaking of forest stand improvement, this is another one of our most popular practices. It still requires a forest management plan to do forest stand improvement. We do have our implementation requirement sheet out there for forest stand improvement that's utilized by our consultants as well as DNR to actually tell landowners what to do. Combine that with your DNR planning sheet, kind of gives you the basic on what level of forest stand improvement you're going to do. But we do have those resources available. We may make some adjustments to the planning sheet and our implementation requirement based on the new scenarios. But for right now, we're kind of keeping it the same. And like I said, plan it just like you always have. And our planners can then determine which scenario fits best in that contract. I did put a note in here, and most of you are doing this, but 314 should be scheduled in advance of 666 forest stand improvement unless invasive species are already controlled on the property. This is kind of the standard we see in Indiana, is that you want to do the invasive work first. If you do the forest stand improvement before you control the invasives, you're just letting more light in and making the problem worse. Again, we cannot force landowners to do invasive species control, but typically the best recommendation is control those invasive species first, then do the forest stand improvement. On the next slide, we're going to look at the different scenarios, and you're going to see a scenario for tree marking scenario. And there's a note in there that says that tree marking scenario is not authorized for tree marking only. The tree marking scenario is to do the work, to do the forest stand improvement, whether the forester marks it first or they just go out there and do the forest stand improvement as they go. A landowner could still hire a forester to mark forest stand improvement for them, and the landowner is going to do the cutting, but we are just going to pay for the implementation of that. Having somebody else mark it for you, sure, you can include that cost because we're just paying an incentive payment to do the work. However the landowner chooses to do that is fine, and however they choose to spend that incentive payment is fine. But we are not going to pay just for marking the trees. It's for the actual work being done. I don't think many foresters use our 643 restoration of rare and declining communities. This scenario is kind of taken away from us this year, and so we've just folded it into 666 forest stand improvement. And there's a scenario for pre-commercial thinning hand tools scenario that would be used in place of the 643. Again, the name doesn't mean anything. We're just trying to figure out how to get the restoration work done and have a payment rate to make it feasible. So here's a little table showing the different rates for 666 there on the bottom left. You can see the different scenarios and the payment rates. And then up at the top is kind of the explanation of that current scenario and the historic scenario and how they match up. So our tree marking scenario is now our medium level forest stand improvement, which is working on 10 to 40 square feet of basal area removed, 100 to 400 trees killed, 10 to 40 crop trees released, or 30 to 90 grapevines controlled. We are pretty flexible on this. We're pretty hard and fast on we typically want to see at least 10 square feet of basal area removed. But if you mix in a combination of grapevines and basal area removed and crop trees released, we recognize that it's not always a straightforward, we're just doing vines or just crop trees or just basal area reduction. So it's kind of blended all together in here. And we just want to make sure we're doing enough work to justify that incentive payment. But you as the forester, again, needs to prescribe that in your description. If you've got a property that's all vines and that's all you want done, write it up and schedule it that way. If you want a mix of crop tree release and vine control, write it up and put it in your plan that way. We can pay for it. These are just guidelines. Commercial thinning hand tool scenario this year. Again, it's paying a lot. It's paying about $330 an acre. This is very similar to what we called 666D, which was the understory thinning enhancement in past years. That was our most popular CSP enhancement, especially in northern Indiana. They were using that to basically thin the understory of the forest to get rid of all the shade tolerant species. It wasn't really oak regeneration. It was just aimed at getting rid of all the junk in the understory of the forest and controlling vines in preparation for a harvest. So basically pre-harvest TSI with a heavy emphasis on the understory. And so that's why we included the understory removal on the trees killed per acre, just to let people know that they can use this scenario in place of that 666D and still accomplish the same thing. Get rid of that junky understory and prepare the site for a future harvest. So we called our openings temporary forest openings. This year, the name has changed to creating patch clear cuts. I'm fine with that. I like the word clear cut. I don't mind putting it out there for people. But if you have a landowner that wants to create an opening on their property, this is not complete an existing opening from a timber sale. This is create a new opening in a fully stocked stand. They can use the creating patch clear cuts to go in there and create a clear cut, to make a clear cut, little clear cuts on their property, to restart forest succession, create some young forest habitat. And again, it pays a lot per acre. I've mentioned this to people in the past. If you have a woodland that has had a timber harvest and there are a few little openings out there that have already been created, and you want to do TSI across that property and you want to complete those openings that exist on the property, you are, in my opinion, you should just be scheduling the tree marking scenario to go out there and do the TSI across the property that's needed. If that includes a few small openings, great. If that includes mainly normal TSI, great. But kind of fold that in. There was a question in the chat about any acreage requirements for clear cuts. We do have some guidance in Indiana. It has to follow the U.S. Fish and Wildlife BAT guidelines for Indiana. It pretty much states that individual openings cannot exceed 10 acres. So they can basically be 1 to 10 acres in size for a patch clear cut. But you can have multiple openings on a property as long as there are buffers in between them. And it's spelled out in the regulations. I think it's 250 feet in between openings. But if you had a property that needed multiple 10-acre patch clear cuts created on it, there just needs to be some buffers created in between those patch clear cuts so that they're not a one contiguous opening. But there used to be a thought in Indiana you could only schedule up to 10 acres. That's not actually true. You could schedule 20 acres of patch clear cuts. And if it was in two 10-acre openings, they just need to be separated by at least 250 feet to break it up a little bit. We did retain the thinning for wildlife and forest health scenario. This is one we put in place last year, really to help with the Southern Indiana Sentinel Landscape, RCPP. And this was a targeted oak ecosystem restoration scenario. It's paying $561 per acre, but we put some pretty strict requirements on it. The site needs to have at least 40 square feet of basal area in oak and hickory over 12 inches in diameter at breast height, or it needs to be an oak site with established advanced oak regeneration with an overstory degraded by an inappropriate harvest. We do recognize in Indiana we have some great oak sites that get high graded. There's good regeneration in there, but you've got to go in and do a lot of work to get rid of what was left in the overstory, as well as release those oak seedlings that have become established. So you can use it for both of those scenarios, but just know we're looking at deadening everything from 12 inches down to about a half inch at root collar. So in a more mature oak forest with a heavy understory of maple and beech, this is not just taking out the maple and beech, but getting down and getting rid of some of the other interfering species, whether that's ironwood or musclewood, whatever's coming in on that site. You got to take out some of those smaller stems as well. We really want to let that light get to the forest floor and try to either enhance or stimulate that oak regeneration on the property. This scenario is not typically planned property wide. Are there some properties out there that you could plan it property wide? Yes. And as the forester, if you looked at a property and said 100% of this needs thinning for wildlife and forest health, you can justify it and plan it that way. But if you look at a property, I was talking to one of the consultants, they've got a property that was pretty heavily high graded, but they acknowledged of the 40 acres, there's maybe 25 or 30 that need this intense thinning for wildlife and forest health. And on the remainder of it, they can just do the basic medium level of forest stand improvement, and it'll be just fine. So they're going to split it up and not necessarily plan this on every acre. We want you to target this and map out the stands where you want to do the intense oak ecosystem restoration work. You guys don't get involved in our CPAs and DIAs. These are our planning activities that are technical service providers. If a landowner wants a forest management plan written by NRCS, we can sign them up for a CPA 106 and a DIA 165. CPA is conservation planning activity, and DIA is design and implementation activity. So basically, the CPA 106 provides the landowner with all the background information that's typically in a forest management plan, along with a forest inventory. And then the DIA 165 provides the how to implement that. So basically, our implementation requirements make up the DIA 165. Our planners, the guidance we give them is that if a landowner wants a forest management plan, they will typically schedule the CPA 106 and the DIA 165 together. Those are planned at the same time on the same acres, and it's typically a 1-year contract to get that forest management plan developed and written by a technical service provider. This has become more and more common in Indiana. They can do this on small properties. This can be planned on large properties. This can be planned. It could even be planned on a classified forest property. If there's a classified forest owner that really wants a detailed forest inventory with species and volumes and values, they could request this, and it could be planned, and it allows a consulting forester to write a more detailed forest management plan with a very intense inventory. Typically, we don't do that. Typically, we use your forest stewardship plan and the planning sheet, and away we go. But just know this is an option. There's nothing that says it cannot be planned on a classified forest property. We just don't want to duplicate effort or be inefficient with our planning. If there's already a forest stewardship plan and the basic information we need to get to practices, that's great. But if there is a landowner that's wanting more detail and more information on their trees and the volumes and values, this can be an option for them as well. They're not excluded from utilizing this, but we just don't want to duplicate effort. And here's how the costs break down. Again, you guys don't necessarily plan this or schedule this, but just so you understand what we're paying for forest management plans for landowners. They changed it this year. Last year, it used to be a breakdown by acreage, like less than 20 acres, 20 to 100, 100 to 150, and so on. This year, they have switched to what they call a base cost and an implementation cost. So if a landowner is going to get a 106 and a 165 scheduled on their property, a 40-acre property, they're going to get paid for the base cost for the 106, and the base cost for the 165 is kind of a flat rate. And then the implementation cost is a per acre rate. So for the 40 acres, they're going to get an additional 575 per acre for the 106 and an additional $1.13 per acre for the DIA 165. And so those two up, and I have a little chart here just to see what we're roughly paying for forest management plans. I broke it out by the CPA 106 by acres, 20, 50, 100, 300, and 500. The DIA separately, and then over here on the top right is the combined. If they were to do both the CPA and DIA together, you can see for a 20 acre or less property, it's $120 an acre for that forest management plan. If you get up over 500, it's only paying $11.42 per acre. Again, there's some economies of scale there as well for doing that work and the number of inventory points you have to take and all that. But it's a very good payment, in my opinion, for forest management plans. And this is a priority for Indiana. We are a planning first agency. We want to assist landowners with planning and getting good information to make good decisions to manage their resource concerns. And the forest management plan, the CPA and DIA, is a great way to do that. And again, the consultants, we hear comments from them. Some of them like doing the plans, some of them don't like doing the plans. They have to comply with our standard, but it does require pretty much a full-blown forest inventory, which is helpful for that landowner, especially if they're looking to manage timber on their property. This is a nice way to get that information gathered and put into a plan so they can make good decisions in the future. And then I did want to just provide you guys a little bit of information on our resources. I'm going to try to send Brenda, again, I already sent her the presentation and part of our practice user guide. We'll make sure you get the full practice user guide when it's in more of a final stage. But there are other resources out there that you can utilize. If you have not had a chance to get on our field office technical guide, I would encourage you to do that. That is where most of this information lives, and you can find it at any time. We have our forestry technical notes in section 1. All of our conservation practice standards, the details of what 314 brush management is or forest stand improvement is, are listed in section 4. Our payment schedules and the practice user guide can be found in section 1. And then the CPA and DIA information is in section 3. It actually just takes you to a national website where those templates are kept, and those are national criteria. We do not have flexibility in saying what is or is not in our forest management plan. We have to work off of the national criteria. If you haven't seen the photog, it's actually fairly easy to navigate once you get in there. You can follow this link. It'll take you to the website. You can put in which state, and it pulls up a simple decision tree here as to which section you want to go into. This is where it can be a little bit confusing. As you click through these tabs, it will show you what is included in those sections, but just know that our practices and standards are here in section 4, and the technical notes are in section 1. And I'd strongly encourage you to utilize those technical notes. And if you see deficiencies in them or different technical notes that you wish NRCS would produce, please let me know. and we can work on getting those produced so they're available to you and our landowners. Just a few quick notes here on the different sections and what's included. If you're looking for information on the Conservation Reserve Program, Section 1 is the place you want to go to under General Resources and References. There is a whole list of Conservation Reserve documents. All the practices are in there. All the safe practices are listed. The sheets on what's required for plantings in there. There's a number of different maps and reference lists in Section 1, as well as our payment rates and our technical notes. Like I said, Section 3 has the conservation planning activities, and it's primarily a link to the website. We do offer consultants and our TSPs a sample plan and a review sheet that they can use to make sure that their plan meets our standard. Those aren't available on the website, but I can get those to anybody that wants them if you're curious to see what's in the sample plan or the checklist. And then Section 4 has all of our conservation practice standards, and they are listed alphabetically. I like to point that out because most people don't have the numbers memorized to look it up by number. If you know that 612 is tree planting, you can use the search function up here and search 612 and it'll pull it right up. But if not, you can look under the Section 4, the conservation practice standards, and they're listed alphabetically. And with that, Brenda, I don't even remember how long we scheduled this meeting for, but we're about an hour and 15 minutes in. And if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to take some questions. If you want to come off mute, you're welcome to do that and ask a question or raise your hand. That was a lot of information in a hurry. Is anybody too disturbed or upset by what they saw today? Maybe not too much. Well, that's good. Again, if you start digging into this and you have questions or concerns, you're welcome to reach out to Brenda or directly to me. I'm happy to answer questions if you have them. If there are any issues, I anticipate, we have a lot of forest management plans that have been written. They're in the hands of our DCs. Maybe they didn't get funded last year or the year before, but they're going to try again this year. There is going to be some confusion as they look at those old plans and try to convert it to the new payment scenarios. They may have questions for you. We always tell our planners to reach back out to the forester that developed the plan if there is a question. And they should be looking at those older plans and putting eyes on the property. At the very least, we're supposed to get out there once a year to make sure things haven't changed from an invasive species standpoint, especially. We don't anticipate forest stand improvement needs changing very much, but we do like to get out there and verify percent infestation of invasive species. You might get a district conservationist may ask you for some follow-up information to make sure things are still the same on the property. If you don't know and you can get out there and take a look at it, of course, we appreciate that. If for some reason you're not available or don't have time and we need to get an area forester or somebody out there to do a quick eyes on the property to make sure things haven't changed, we can make that happen as well. We just appreciate y'all communicating with us and trying to work with us on the different applications that are out there, changes that may be needed or updates. And if you get contacted by a DC and it's a property that you're not working on or is not part of classified forest and you don't have time to get to it, just be professional and let them know that they need to reach out to an NRCS forester or get a TSP to assist the landowner. We can make that happen as well. We like keeping you all focused on classified forest and wildlands. If you end up having time or help out on another property, we greatly appreciate that, but we understand that is not part of our agreement with you all. And we'll try to get it covered in other ways if we need to. I do want to mention before we go today, Brenda's been doing a great job of keeping us updated on staffing issues with the DNR. We hope that improves and gets better. We are also having some struggles with our district conservationists. We have some vacancies out there. We pretty much have actings in every county or somebody at least covering that county. But just know we are not in a big hiring spree right now and don't really have the ability to hire very much. So there's going to be a little bit of confusion. There may be changes with actings over time. We are not as good as Brenda is at keeping us up to date on who is covering which county. I apologize for that, but we don't seem to have a great system for getting that word out to you all when an acting changes. So the only thing I can tell you is reach out directly to that office, and don't be surprised if a name changes or a face changes when you walk through the door. Do you see a question out there, Jeremiah? Did you have a question or comment?
A couple things real quick. One,
Sure.
on DC's checking forestry practices. So they are allowed now to check those post-treatment?
They do. If they're one of our certified planners, they do have job approval authority to look at certain practices. And it's typically the brush management, forest stand improvement, even tree planting. They can do the checkout on it. They can't do the design for it, but they can do the checkout work. Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I was just wondering, I've had a few that they've checked that kind of course, when I go second year to check, first year really wasn't met. So a little bit of difficulty there sometimes with them checking stuff. And I think wanting to get it checked, get it done, get it off the plate.
Yep.
And then Ryan, I'd heard something about maybe he's taken over a district for a little while.
He is. So Ryan Barnes is our Southwest area forester. He's been with us a couple of years now. He did take an acting DC position in Pike County. So he is going to spend the majority of his time in Pike County, but the area conservationist down there has still said he's available to assist area wide with forestry practices and different things. But again, it's probably going to be a little bit more limited than it was in the past. He had great flexibility and it was completely focused on forestry, and now his time is going to be split a little bit. But they're trying to fill that Pike County spot with somebody, and we're not able to hire. So Ryan got tapped on the shoulder to give it a try.
Okay. And then last thing real quick, I'm getting kind of mixed dates as far as when we're going to need stuff turned into the DCs. Do you have any sort of a more clarity on that? Just what our timeline's looking at?
And jump in on this one if he's listening. I don't think we've put out our formal bulletin yet on the, of course, we had an application deadline way back in January for EQIP and CSP. And I thought it was sounding like mid to late March is going to be the EQIP deadline.
Actually, Dan?
Yeah, go ahead, Shannon.
Actually, we'll be getting that information out publicly, but our ranking deadline, we're looking to be in mid-April.
Okay.
And so that is kind of the date where statewide we will make funding decisions. It's what we call our ranking deadline. Many times our specific areas and or even district conservationists will back that date up about 2 or 3 weeks so that they have plenty of time to get all the information into our computer system so it can be effectively ranked. So once we get that out, we'll encourage our DCs to contact you and let you know where they hope to get information from you so they can get it to our system and effectively consider each client consistently.
Okay, appreciate that. I've had a few that are kind of chomping at the bit to get stuff now, but without really knowing CSP and kind of what all we're looking at there, it's hard to do a planning sheet, when you don't know for sure.
Yeah, it really is. We understand that and appreciate the patience at all levels. We're doing our best to get that information out. I don't know if can't remember if Dan mentioned it. We're not blaming headquarters, but we just got this hot off the press, this information from our national headquarters. That's the reason for our delay. We're trying our best to get it out to everybody as soon as possible, knowing that it's going to be complicated, but we'll do our best to work together on it. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey,
That's
Dan.
all I got, Dan.
Okay. Thanks, Jeremiah.
Yep.
Hey,
Go ahead,
Dan.
Brenda. Yep.
Brenda. You were working on a forest practice checkout request form.
We were. Yes.
Okay, I didn't know if it was hanging on me somewhere or if it's still in progress or it's just kind of dropped off or.
It's in a little, I'll say it's in limbo right now. We're still working on it and trying to get something out there. This was what came out of our meeting down at Morgan Monroe last year when we recognized there's an issue with communication and that our DCs may not provide you all with everything you need to do the job the first time on when a request is made, and then we have to go back and forth looking for more information. So we were working on a form to get that done. It's kind of been put on the back burner, but it is something I'll work on, Brenda, and see if we can get that going.
I appreciate that. I just was curious on the status. I didn't know if I was holding it up or something.
Nope. And we tried last year. We thought about updating the NRCS DNR planning sheet to include more program stuff like CSP and EQIP. And I don't think the district foresters were excited about that. Were helping me with that. And we didn't do it. And it's probably a good thing because a lot of the enhancements are now dropping out of CSP and we're just going to have practices to implement. So I don't know that many changes are needed. I will be looking at some of our technical documents and trying to make some adjustments just to make sure they align with our current programs and practices. But as we get those updated, we'll make sure we get them out to you all so you have the most current copy of the planning sheet and other documents. Kind of to follow up on Jeremiah's question about DCs doing forestry checkouts, we are still encouraging our DCs to utilize the district foresters as much as possible on classified forest and wildland properties, but we are trying to empower them and get them out there to do practice checkout, especially on, we work with a lot of smaller properties that are not in classified forest, and it can take a lot of time to get a forester scheduled to get up there. We're spread thin just like you all are. And so we're trying to get them trained and able to get out there and look at those properties and do those practice checkouts. Will there be those properties that either kind of slip through or get approved and maybe they shouldn't have? There's always that chance. But I found out as I'm getting out and looking at more properties for practice checkout, it depends a lot on who's doing the work and how well they got the information up front on what needed to be done, as what typically that first year of brush management looks like when they're done with it. And sometimes there's some flexibility going into the second year, as long as we know they're going to keep working on it and get it done. They may get through and still have to do the work to follow up. But again, the hope is that they've done a good job the first year, and by the third year, we're at 95% control. Any other questions or comments? All right. Well, otherwise, we will let you go and let you get back to your day. I appreciate y'all taking the time this morning to join us. And as soon as I get a recording on YouTube, Brenda, I will get that link sent out to you to share with any other district foresters that weren't able to attend. And like I said, as I get more resources, I will get those out to you as well to share with the district foresters.
Dan, as always, and Shannon too, thank you for keeping us informed and always being out there to help us. So thanks for setting this up. Much appreciated.
Yep. Thanks for joining, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Good job. Thank you.